Hello everyone, welcome to the video. So my last couple of videos have been centered around Tolkien's work, and I'm finding it increasingly interesting. I've loved this for a long time, but it's only very recently I've started to draw out the deeper significance of Tolkien's work as a valid mythology for specifically the Anglo-Saxon world, but it's got patterns and motifs that fit around the world, and how that relates to Steiner's work and Plato's work also, both of whom I've been particularly interested in over the last several years. Now, my background, for context, is academically is leadership and business management. I was really interested in how we organize ourselves effectively to work together toward shared aims, toward good aims as well. And leadership within the voluntary sector, voluntary organizations, NGOs, things like that, really interested me because people in those roles typically have to be good leaders. They have to inspire other people to follow them. And so over the last decade, various iterations, I've been developing something that I've most recently started to call the Evolved Leaders Pathway. The basic idea behind it is that we no longer have elders in our society, and due to that, we are in a pickle in many different ways: climate, social, cultural, economic. All of the problems we see in the world are down to a lack of elders, and that is to say, a lack of wisdom being placed in a revered position within our society. So I've been trying to figure out, how do we create these elders? How do we become these elders if they don't currently exist? Now, it's not just a matter of creating elders. You have to create people who will show the world that those elders are to be respected. And they've also got to be people who respect those people. And I've broken it down into a 3-stage process of maturity for men, because I work with men and I am a man, but this is all with some adjustments relevant to women. Man, patriarch, elder. The man is the part of us that is very independence driven. Has to find out who he is by pushing himself out into the world and finding the perimeter, finding where he can move to without hitting resistance, what his capacity is. So in that pursuit, he'd be very self-centered, very egotistical. And there's downsides to that, which most people would agree with, but there are positives as well, because we need these people. We need this young masculine energy to drive out and discover the limitations so that we can have an understanding of what and who we are and what and who we are not, where the room for growth is. The second stage of patriarch is a word that I'm reclaiming because I don't think it's a bad thing, nor is matriarch. The negatives of the man stage are what people refer to when they talk about this evil patriarchy, I believe. But for the patriarch, it's not about dominance or oppression. It's about interdependence as opposed to independence. Interdependence. It's about balancing my own needs with the needs of everybody else. The patriarch is a balanced, stable leader in the way that I'm defining it. They're necessary. They keep the man in line and they point to the elder. These people are worth listening to. Pay attention, young man. And so we move over to the elder, who through life's many, many challenges of striving to understand themselves, then with that understanding gaining temporal power and authority and leading in the world and resources, they then let go of all of that. Their main focus is transcendence, to transcend worldly affairs in the more spiritual sense, to transcend the physical world eventually, but to step outside of the social world and to be available as a guide, a mentor, a storyteller, a steward of resources. So I've had that in my mind for a long while now. And then I've known that there's some relationship with Plato's work I've been interested in for a long time, and the elemental theory from the pre-Socratics, and both of which I've worked with for a while. But then Steiner's work came in as well and started to become more prominent for me. And I could see it was when I started to think about how Tolkien's work related to Steiner's work that I saw. I'm seeing still, so this is an open conversation with you all. I would love to hear your comments. I'm seeing still how all of these ideas link. Now, Plato believed that there were three parts of the soul: the rational, the spirited, and the appetites and consumptive. Parts of the soul, key point. Steiner believed that there were three faculties of the soul: the thinking, the feeling, and the willing. There's a link here between those, but also the four elements, the four classical elements: thinking, feeling, willing, reason, spiritedness, and appetites. Threes, whereas there are four elements. Why is this? If you look at willing, the will typically is associated with fire. The feeling often associated with water, the thinking often associated with air. When you look at Plato's theory, you have reason, mind, fairly obvious. Spiritedness, again, could be associated with fire. And appetites could be associated with fire also, because there's this drive to consume, but also it's about earth. It's very earthy, it's very basic, physical, material reality oriented. But I don't think that's how it works. I think willing, Steiner's willing, corresponds to the appetites. That feeling corresponds to spiritedness, and reason, thinking corresponds to reason. And the last one is fairly easy. There's no real disagreement, I don't think, about that. But in other in communities and online communities and whatnot, there's disagreement about the others. So in conversation with a teacher recently, Richard Abbott of the Hermitage Development Centre here in the UK, who I'd say is a torchbearer for Hermeticism globally now, put forward the view, maybe it's not his own, that fire, or the soul, in terms of the four elements, is not in the lower self. The body, the mind, the feelings, the emotions, the mind, and the physical body. It's not in there. It's something above that can act through those things. Those are the three, but it isn't it. So you could take that willing, thinking, and feeling are phenomena, ways that the soul acts through. Thinking being through the mind, feeling through the emotions, willing through the body, because it's the body that has to do the things. So I'm relating willing to body, not to fire. And also Plato's theory. Reason, fair enough. That is the soul acting through the mind. Spiritedness, is it fire? Well, I would relate it to water, because it is the fire, how it acts on the water, that gives us our spiritedness, I would say. Anger is an emotion. It's water. It's a fiery emotion nonetheless, but it is an emotion. So it is water to me. And then the appetites, I would agree, are earth. So we have earth, water, air, and fire coming through them all. But then looking further into the stories of the three main characters, as I would determine them to be, in The Lord of the Rings, we've got Frodo, Aragorn, and Gandalf. Frodo, I would say, is a picture of willing, Steiner's words, Aragorn of feeling, and Gandalf of thinking. Gandalf seems obvious, although there's perhaps some fire in there as well as air because he's a spiritual being. But then so is Aragorn essentially being the king. He's the anointed one, the chosen one. So there's some fire in there as well. And with Frodo, he's a hobbit of the Shire. If there are not a more earthy people on the planet, I don't know what there are, where they are in Middle Earth. So that seems like an obvious picture of Earth, yet it is the will that has to act through those beings to come all the way from the most idyllic place in the world through to Mordor, the worst possible place on Earth. The will has to be harnessed. So the fire has to come through the earth. But although all three of those characters have near-death experiences that transform them from their former self to who they become, so for Frodo, from the Shire Hobbit to the one who saves the world, from the wandering ranger Aragorn to the king, and from the grey wandering wizard to the white wise wizard, Gandalf. Aragorn and Gandalf do that alone, essentially. It's a process that their own wills are involved in, and maybe some higher will. But Frodo has Sam. His near-death experience is when Shelob stung him, wrapped him in silk, and he was lying paralyzed. His will had been paralyzed on the floor. And it was Sam's will that had to interfere with that situation and bring him out of it. So it's that we're seeing some attempt at reconciling this disagreement between the various people, the various authors and thinkers throughout history, as to where earth and fire interact in the body. These are all just thoughts, where I am with it. I've sat on putting a video out for a while because I wanted to let this move more, but I want to be engaging with people around these topics now. So although the presentation may not have been as linear, to say it's an evolving thought process for me, I hope that it has landed, something has made sense to you there, and that there's something for you to there comment on so we can get a conversation going. We'd love to hear from you. Anybody who's into Tolkien, into Steiner, into Plato, then please get in touch, make a comment below, and maybe we can organize some group calls to go into these topics even further. I look forward to hearing from you.